Alright, so before we jump into the list, just a quick heads up to clear up any confusion. First, this video is going to cover the original Naruto manga arc and their matching anime episode, nothing from the filler or sequel series. Second, I'm taking a bit of creative freedom with how I define the start and the end of the arc. There's no one official way to break them up differently. Different sources slices them differently, and even the official ones sometimes contradict each other. For example, some arc splits the Chunin Exams and Konoha Cross into two separate arcs, while the anime takes it even further by defining Chunin Exam into prelims and finals. Or take the Itachi Pursuit arc, split into Itachi vs Sasuke, Jiraiya vs Pain, and the actual Pursuit mission. But the manga kind of treats it all as one big storyline. You get the point. So now that's done, let's get on with the list.
Number 12. At the bottom of the list is the 4th Shinobi World War arc, and yeah, I know this is probably the most predictable Naruto take ever. But really, is anyone surprised? This arc has a lot of issues. The two biggest problems, in my opinion, are pretty straightforward. First, the plot completely stalls out. Once the allied shinobi forces start clashing with Kabuto's army of reanimated ninja, the story essentially grinds to a halt. There's no meaningful forward momentum. It just becomes an endless sequence of battles. And that leads to the second problem: most of those battles aren't even interesting. What you're left with is a long, drawn-out stretch of the story with no compelling narrative hooks and a bunch of Oni-inspired fights. There's very little to keep the audience truly invested. That said, I don't think the arc is entirely without merit, so let me take a moment to defend it. The beginning is actually quite strong, especially on a first watch. Even though the arc's execution falters later on, its setup is undeniably exciting. A global battle against an undead army made up of the most powerful ninja in history. That concept alone is incredibly hype. Personally, I remember getting genuinely excited to see familiar characters return, even if they were reanimated. The uneasy alliance between Obito and Kabuto added a layer of tension that worked well early on. There were also some interesting developments outside the battlefield, like Sasuke awakening the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and Naruto training to master the Nine-Tails power. The flashbacks involving Minato and deeper context they provide for the Nine-Tails attack are some of the best emotional beats in the series. Unfortunately, once the actual war begins in earnest, the quality drops hard. But things do start to improve again once Naruto and Killer Bee enter the fray. From there, the arc slowly starts building toward a stronger climax. By the end, we're treated to some genuinely engaging moments, like the 5 Kage taking on Madara, Naruto and Bee facing off against Obito, and Sasuke and Itachi teaming up to fight Kabuto. It's not perfect. Also, I have to give credit where it's due. Madara's introduction against the 4th Division is without a question the best villain introduction in the entire series. That alone earns this arc a few extra points, even if it still lands at the bottom of the ranking. Number 11.
The Kazekage Rescue Arc does a solid job of deepening character development and expanding the world of Naruto.
One of the arc's strongest points is how it continues to develop existing characters in meaningful ways. Naruto's determination to save Gaara adds new depth to his character, making him more relatable and likable. Meanwhile, Sakura finally steps up and takes on a crucial role as one of the story's central heroes, something long overdue.
Gaara himself also benefits from spotlight. His conversation with Kankuro and his fight with Deidara go a long way in reshaping how viewers see him. Focusing the arcs around his rescue was a smart move. It's an emotionally resonant goal that keeps driving the narrative forward.
This arc is also significant from a world-building perspective. It's the first time the story really showcases another village from the 5 great nations in any meaningful detail. We get to see the Sand Village in action, learn more about the tailed beasts and their Jinchuriki,
and even get the better sense of Akatsuki's broader goal.
There's a lot of content here that's either vital to the overarching story, genuinely interesting, or both.
That said, the arc isn't without its flaws, and for me, they start to pile up once Team Kakashi and Team Guy begin their missions.
From the moment they start clashing with the Akatsuki, something about the arc begins to feel off. For starters, the inclusion of Itachi and Kisame, albeit as clones, feels completely unnecessary. It's jarring to see them appear here, especially knowing that the protagonists aren't even fighting the real versions. Most of the fights in this arc leave a lot to be desired, with one exception.
Sakura and Granny Chio's battle against Sasori.
The rest range from forgettable to outright disappointing. As a result, the arc's climax ends up feeling pretty lackluster.
The final confrontation with Deidara isn't terrible, but it lacks the emotional or thematic tones we've come to expect from major arc finales in Naruto. Even Kakashi's use of Kamui, while cool, doesn't do quite enough to elevate the ending. Overall, it's a good arc with strong ideas, but some of its execution holds it back from being truly great.
Number 10. Next up is the final arc, and I'll admit, what ultimately tipped the scale was the final stretch of chapters, especially everything involving Naruto and Sasuke. Those moments really elevate the arc as a whole. Even the climactic fight against Kaguya, while far from spectacular, is serviceable. What stands out about this arc is its consistency. Unlike the previous two arcs, there aren't any major lows or jarring tonal shifts. It maintains a steady pace throughout, and nothing in it feels especially boring or misplaced.
Now, Kaguya is a controversial villain.
She's a massive step down from Madara and Obito, like a huge step down. That said, I still think she works in her own way. There's something captivating about her presence as this berserk, god-like force of nature. Her abilities are visually striking, and her eerie calmness during battle adds a chilling, unsettling layer to her character. She might not be deep, but she's fun to watch. Beneath that serene expression, you can tell she's completely unhinged, and Kishimoto does a good job conveying that without being too heavy-handed. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, Kakashi Susanoo. Yeah, I know, a lot of people think it's one of the dumbest things in the entire series, and honestly, I don't totally disagree. It's ridiculous, over the top, and makes very little sense when you stop to think about it. But despite all of that, it's also insanely cool, like comically cool. There's just something about watching Kakashi with both Mangekyo abilities and a full-blown perfect Susanoo that hits the right nerve. It completely breaks suspension of disbelief, but I'm convinced Kishimoto knew that. He had to. There's just enough of an explanation tossed in to keep it from being total nonsense. What really seals this arc's place is the Naruto vs Sasuke fight. Sasuke's heel turn is handled well, and the final fight between him and Naruto, especially in the anime, is absolutely stellar. It's emotional, beautifully choreographed, and full of character-driven tension. Naruto's ability to finally reach Sasuke is deeply cathartic, and honestly, it changed the way I viewed Sasuke entirely. I started that fight disliking him, and by the end, I genuinely considered him one of my favorite characters. It brought his whole journey into perspective in a way I hadn't appreciated before. My biggest gripe with the arc, though, is Zetsu. He's not likable, which is probably intentional, but I think he genuinely detracts from the arc. That recon involving him left a bad taste in my mouth. My opinion on it has softened over time, especially since I first read the chapter where it all goes down, but I still don't care for it. Some people go as far as saying it ruins the entire series, and I think that's extreme, but it's definitely a low point. Even so, with everything the arc does right, especially the emotional payoff, it comfortably earns its spot here. Number 9. This arc doesn't really suffer from any major pacing issues, which is a definite plus, but at the same time there aren't any standout moments that really hit me as hard as, say, the Zetsu twist is, for better or worse. I know a lot of people dislike Sai, and while I'm not here to be the president of the Sai Defense Force, I don't think he's nearly as bad as people make him out to be. He's not a favorite of mine, and I'll admit I would have preferred Kokoshi to be part of the team instead of Yamato. But that said, I actually like Yamato quite a bit. All the story threads surrounding him, Danzo, the Foundation, and Root are genuinely compelling, and they give the arc a darker, more conspiratorial edge that adds depth to the world. Sasuke being the central figure in the arc also goes a long way toward making it more engaging. He's been this shadowy, elusive character ever since the end of the Sasuke retrieval arc, and this is the first time we really catch up with him in a meaningful way. The narrative momentum from the previous arc feeds directly into this one. It always feels like the arc is building towards something, and more importantly, something worth the wait. Thankfully, those payoffs rarely disappoint. The confrontation at Tenchi Bridge is intense. Sasuke is living with them at this point, so their involvement feels earned. They're both strong villains with tons of presence, and yet, impressively, Sasuke manages to steal the spotlight from them by the end of the arc. His reappearance and the way it's handled is executed beautifully. The reunion between him and the rest of Team 7 is filled with tension, great character dynamics, and solid direction. It's a pivotal moment that lands perfectly. This arc is definitely slower than some of the higher ranked ones, but I never felt like it dragged or lost momentum. The peaks may not reach the emotional or action-driven highs of other arcs above it, but its steady quality and consistent storytelling make it one of the more balanced and satisfying arcs in the series. Number 8. This one was incredibly close to the next arc in the ranking. Honestly, it's hard to say which one is better. I might feel differently about the order next week, but for now, I'm placing the Ten Tails arc at number 8. And just to be clear, even though we're still relatively low on the list, I think this arc is fantastic. In fact, I'd say the arcs really start to become spectacular as early as 9th place. The reason I bring that up is because this arc essentially acts as part 2 of the 4th Great Ninja War, and a lot of people lump it in with the first half, which has a much more mixed reputation. Personally, I don't feel the same way. I think this part of the war is a blast from start to finish. Sure, I have more issues with this arc than I do with something like the Reunion arc, but I also think its peaks are much higher. A number of moments that fans consider highlights of the entire series happen here. Obito's battle against the Blood Mist Shinobi, Koshi vs Obito, and
Guy vs Madara,
just to name a few.
Madara and Obito are both incredible villains
In this arc, and what makes them even more compelling is that they're not really working together. They're simultaneously battling the entire world and each other in a bid to become the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, which makes for a fascinating dynamic. The return of the Hokage is another major strength.
Each of them are well written and distinct,
and their presence adds both gravitas and fun. Watching them fight,
whether individually or in pairs like Minato and Tobirama, is always entertaining.
Naruto's progression throughout the arc is also a highlight. His ability to rapidly adapt to the changing battlefield, strengthen his bond with Kurama, and eventually stack Sage Mode on top of his Nine Tails chakra makes for an exhilarating power-up arc. It's the kind of development that feels earned and satisfying. There's definitely some weird stuff here, moments that either stretch logic or feel overly convenient, but none of it crosses the line into ruining the experience. The overall tone, pacing, and energy of the arc make it such a fun watch or read that the flaws barely register. The highs are so strong and the action is so consistently enjoyable that it's easy to overlook the messier parts. Number 7. Hidan's arc contains some of the most memorable and iconic moments in the entire series.
The introduction of Rasen Shuriken is not only visually impressive,
but also backed by a genuinely engaging training sequence. Naruto has always excelled at making training arcs compelling, and this one is no exception. Watching Naruto push himself to master a new technique feels rewarding, and the payoff in battle is well worth it.
Both fights with Hidan and Kakuzu are thrilling.
The action is sharp, the stakes feel real, and the pacing keeps the tension high.
Azuma's death
is a gut punch. It's deeply emotional and instantly raises the arc's stakes. It makes the danger feel more immediate, especially with the very real possibility that other beloved characters
like Kakashi or members of Azuma's team
could be next. That loss casts a shadow over everything that follows and fuels the intensity of the revenge plot.
Shikamaru's solo confrontation with Hidan
is easily one of the standout scenes in the entire series. It's tense, strategic, and emotionally charged, equal parts satisfying and terrifying. It's a perfect showcase of how far Shikamaru has come as a character and as a ninja. While there isn't a huge amount more to say about the arc, it doesn't need much. It's simply a strong, well-executed story from beginning to end. Number 6. Saying that one of the fanbase's most beloved arcs only ranks 6th on my list definitely puts me in a tough spot.
I know that for a lot of people, Land of Waves is their favorite of Naruto's arcs, and honestly I get it. It's an incredible arc. If I could justify placing it higher, I absolutely would. But something has to take 6th place, and this is the one. That said, I completely understand why somebody would view it as the peak of the series. It delivers in so many ways and sets the tone for everything that follows. I just happen to like the next 5 arcs a little bit more.
Let me be clear, this arc is phenomenal.
Zabuza and Haku are outstanding first villains.
They're dangerous, layered, and perfectly suited to set the tone for what Naruto is capable of. The introduction of the main cast, Team 7, is handled brilliantly, with standout moments like the bell test, the Demon Brothers encounter, and the team's first face off with Zabuza. The entire bridge sequence is packed with tension and emotion, making it one of the strongest closing acts in any introductory arc in shonen. The subplot with Inari and his father, while emotionally effective, might be the only element that feels a bit excessive. It's not bad by any means, it just occasionally slows the pace. But honestly, that's the only critique I can make, and even that feels minor. What makes Land of Waves such a perfect first arc is how well it establishes the world of Naruto.
It introduces nearly all the key mechanics and themes: chakra, teamwork, the ninja hierarchy, emotional stakes, while also delivering fights that are as smart as they are exciting. One of the best examples is the battle between Team 7 and Zabuza.
On paper, it shouldn't work. Naruto and Sasuke have no business going up against someone of Zabuza's caliber. but Kishimoto cleverly introduces a limitation of Zabuza's water prison jutsu. As long as he maintains it, he can't move, and that gives the kids a chance not to overpower him, but to outthink him. And they do, the plan they come up with. The fake shuriken trick where Naruto disguises himself as the projectile to catch Zabuza off guard is genuinely brilliant. It's the kind of scene that makes you realize how clever this series can be when it's at its best. It's exciting, unexpected, and entirely driven by the characters' quick thinking rather than brute strength. That same thoughtfulness applies to the power dynamics within Team 7. With someone like Kakashi on the team, it would be easy for the story to devolve into him doing all the work. But the arc sidesteps that by handicapping him and putting the kids in a position where they actually have to contribute for the team to succeed. It balances power levels in a way that keeps the stakes high and everyone involved. The final confrontation on the bridge is a masterclass in escalating tension. It really feels like anyone could die. Tazuna, Sasuke, even Kakashi. Of course, we know Naruto is going to make it through, but for everyone else, the threat feels real.
And then there's emotional gut punch at the end.
Zabuza's redemption, however unexpected, hits hard. In many stories, giving that kind of emotional depth to a cold-blooded mercenary could feel forced or cheesy. But here, it lands perfectly. His bond with Haku, his final stand, it all just works. It's raw, it's tragic, and it shows off Kishimoto's skill in crafting layered characters even among the villains. All in all, Land of Waves is a near-perfect kickoff for the series. It's emotionally rich, structurally tight, and packed with memorable moments. Its only flaw is that the arcs that come after it just go even harder. Number 5. The Chunin Exams Arc is filled with moments where it feels like major characters could actually die, raising the tension far beyond anything seen in the Land of Waves. Unlike that earlier arc though, the threats here aren't limited to just a couple of dangerous individuals. There's an entire roster of intimidating antagonists. Orochimaru enters the picture as a massive threat, bringing along his underlings,
and then there's Gaara,
plus basically anyone with an unsettling or intense design who might be hiding a monstrous power. It marks the beginning of an era where the threats are layered, unpredictable, and much harder to contain.
Orochimaru's introduction is especially more important.
He goes on to become one of the longest standing and most impactful villains in the series. In this arc, he curses Sasuke with the seal that ends up defining much of his character arc. That moment alone, when Sasuke awakens the curse mark and goes on a rampage, is pivotal. It doesn't just signal his growing power, it also foreshadows his eventual defection from the Leaf, making it one of the most significant turning points in the story.
While the stakes in Forest of Death and the Chunin exams aren't strictly life or death, the tension remains high.
The core drama centers on whether the characters will advance and be recognized as true shinobi, and if you follow them this far, you're likely already invested in the outcome. That's part of what makes the arc so gripping. It's a constant string of fights, tests, and challenges that don't let up. The arc maintains an adrenaline-fueled pace, moving from one encounter to the next without slowing down. Now here's a slightly spicy take. Many of these fights aren't technically the best in Naruto, especially when compared to later ones. But every single one of them contributes something important. They advance character development, build rivalries, deepen world building, or introduce new dynamics. Even the weakest battles still make for good scenes. Of course, some fights are exceptional. Gaara vs. Lee speaks for itself. Sasuke vs. Gaara in the finals is a high point, and Shikamaru vs. Temari is clever and character-rich.
Furthermore, Orochimaru vs. Hiruzen during the Konoha Cross is intense.
And Naruto's fight with Gaara is one of his most important early showcases. The arc is also notable for how many important characters it introduces.
Team Guy, Team Asuma, and Team Kurenai all start to play an important role here.
Sure, some of them appeared earlier in the background during the academy days, but this is where they actually step into the spotlight. The Sand siblings, Gaara, Kankuro, and Temari also debut and immediately make an impact.
Jiraiya enters the story here as Orochimaru and Kabuto in a more serious capacity. Even characters like Anko, who sadly ends up being underused, makes a strong first impression.
All in all, the Chunin Exams is one of the most beloved arcs in Naruto, and it's easy to see why. If it's your favorite, I totally understand. The tension, the drama, the sheer volume of standout characters and scenes, it all works. For me though, it just misses the top spots. Number 4. This might be the most underrated arc in the entire Naruto series.
It introduces Itachi and Kisame
in a scene that's nothing short of brilliant.
Like Madara later in series, Itachi is a character who's built up as a major threat long before he even appears. And when he finally shows up, he not only lives up to that hype, he surpasses it.
That initial appearance is one of the key reasons he's so beloved. Sure, the later plot twists surrounding his character add a ton of emotional depth, but without that debut being as effortlessly cool as it is.
This arc also marks the debut of Mangekyo Sharingan, and along with Itachi's signature abilities like Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu.
The use of Tsukuyomi in particular here is still the most striking and stylistic display of that power in the series. Alongside Itachi and Kisame, the Akatsuki as an organization is also introduced, and for the first time, we really understand the looming threat they pose to Naruto. We get Sasuke's first real confrontation with Itachi,
followed almost immediately by a face-off between Jiraiya and Akatsuki duo. Speaking of Jiraiya, this arc is responsible for nearly all the development in his relationship with Naruto. Most of their major bonding happened here, and the groundwork is exactly what makes Jiraiya's eventual death in Shippuden hit as hard as it does. Without this arc, that loss wouldn't have had nearly the same weight as it does.
It also does a great job of delving into the relationship between Sasuke and Itachi, sowing seeds that the series would return to much later. But perhaps just as importantly,
this is also where we are introduced to Tsunade.
Now, I know opinions on her are mixed, but I've always found her compelling, and this arc is where she's at her best. Her dynamic with Naruto is excellent. She's essentially his opposite in every way. Naruto is an idealistic, unproven kid desperate to become Hokage, while Tsunade is a seasoned, cynical woman being offered the role and wanting nothing to do with it. What makes their interactions so entertaining is that they're both loud, stubborn, and headstrong, but in different ways. Naruto lacks tact completely, while Tsunade clearly has it but chooses not to use it. Watching her character arc unfold, gradually confronting her past and accepting the mantle of 5th Hokage is incredibly satisfying.
The moral dilemma Orochimaru presents her with is raw and easy to empathize with.
And her internal conflict feels real.
Plus, she's hilarious.
And her fight scenes are genuinely fun to watch. The arc also introduces Naruto's signature jutsu, the Rasengan. The training sequence that leads to it is one of Kishimoto's most inventive and well executed.
Watching Naruto finally pull it off during the fight with Kabuto and Orochimaru is a top tier moment, one of the best in the series. Tsunade even noticed how clever it is that he uses Shadow Clone to make up for his own limitation, which was an uncommon level of self-awareness in the story's power system. I'll admit, it would have been even better if we get to see Jiraiya, Tsunade and Naruto all fight at full strength together, but I understand why Kishimoto had to hail back there. All things considered, it doesn't take much away from an arc that's this packed with great character moments, high-stakes confrontations and major story developments.
Number 3. The 5 Kage Summit arc stands out as one of the boldest narrative shifts in the entire Naruto series. Sasuke's fights with both the Raikage and Danzo are among the most intense and emotionally charged battles in the franchise, and the way he interacts with the other Kage throughout is fascinating. Up until this point, we've really only been familiar with 2 of the 5 Kage, so finally getting to meet the rest and seeing them all come together for a summit gave the world of Naruto a much needed sense of political and structural depth. What makes this arc especially compelling is the unexpected direction the story takes after Naruto's victory over Pain. Instead of following a predictable training arc or gearing up directly for a confrontation with Tobi Obito, the plot pivots into something much more unpredictably. One of the main characters, Sasuke, effectively declares war on the world. It's an arc filled with chaos diplomacy, fractured alliances, and shifting loyalties. It also breaks away from the formula most previous arcs follow. There's no singular main villain in a conventional sense. Sure, Danzo is an antagonist, but he's technically on the good guy side. Meanwhile, the real threats, Obito and Sasuke, are now more deeply intertwined than ever. The layered structure adds a complexity that's refreshing for the series. While this kind of narrative isn't groundbreaking in the broader media landscape, for Naruto, it's a daring and exciting deviation. That said, the arc isn't without its blemishes.
The Fu and Torune subplot feels incredibly tacked on and tonally disconnected.
It adds nothing of value and just drags down the pace.
Likewise, Sakura's fake love confession to Naruto is one of the more tone-deaf moments in the series, and it didn't do her already divisive characters any favors. On the flip side, the Kisame vs Killer Bee subplot is well done. The battle is solid and it serves to further spotlight Bee as a likable and capable character.
The meat of the arc, though, lies in its character drama.
The final sequences involving Kakashi and Naruto
and Sasuke are some of the most emotionally resonant in the story so far. Sasuke's descent continues with chilling momentum, and his confrontation with Danzo is not just a great fight, it's a moment of reckoning for both characters. Naruto's internal conflict, as he comes to terms with what Sasuke has become, is also deeply affecting. The diplomacy scenes, which might have fallen flat in a lesser arc, are surprisingly engaging. The discussions between the Kage and their aides about how to handle the Akatsuki threat provide some of the best character interactions in the series. Kishimoto deserves a lot of credit here for how quickly and effectively he gives each Kage a distinct voice and presence. This arc is arguably Sasuke's finest hour. Some of his best, most defining moments are found here. One that stands out especially, particularly in the anime, is the scene where he appears on the ceiling of the Kage conference room. As his theme kicks in, he drops down and blocks Mifune's sword with his own in a moment of pure cinematic flair. It's iconic. Despite a few rough patches, the 5 Kage Summit arc is nearly flawless in what it sets out to do. It's a high-stakes, politically charged, emotionally rich turning point in the series, an arc that reshapes the narrative and the characters in significant ways. Number 2. Nearly everything in this arc feels stronger or more resonant than anything in the others. It's an incredibly satisfying combination of all the Sasuke-centric build-up that had been layered throughout Part 1. Every previous arc plays a part in laying the groundwork for this story, especially the Chunin Exams and the search for Tsunade. You can clearly trace the emotional and psychological steps that lead Sasuke to his breaking point here.
It starts with him witnessing Orochimaru's true power firsthand
and getting branded with the curse mark, which not only physically affects him, but psychologically destabilizes him. Then, almost immediately afterward, he sees how Naruto is rapidly improving under the mentorship of another legendary Sannin. Just as he's processing that, he runs into Itachi, who essentially tells him that Naruto is more interesting, more worthy, more powerful. That's a massive blow to someone who already views himself as inferior and is obsessed with gaining strength.
From there, Sasuke gets a front row seat to Naruto nearly killing him with the Rasengan. And not long after that, Orochimaru's subordinates jump in
and flex their more advanced curse mark powers, further confirming to Sasuke how far behind he feels. It's no surprise that all of this sends him spiraling into the decision to abandon the village. When you look back, his trajectory is heartbreaking but also completely logical. This arc also features some of the best character moments for the side cast in the entire series. Choji, Neji, and Kiba arguably never get moments this impactful again. Their fights against the Sound Four are all intense, while animated and emotionally charged. Choji's battle, in particular, is unforgettable not just for how well it's written and executed, but for what it reveals about his character. Even Konkuro, Temari, and Gaara get standout moments, and this is really the last time they feel this pivotal to the main narrative. Seeing the Sand Village come to the Leaf's aid is a powerful and satisfying payoff to their prior antagonism during the Chunin Exams. The stakes are also sky high. This isn't just about stopping a rogue ninja, it's about retrieving someone who was once a teammate, a brother, in arms. And every single participant in the mission has to go all out in one near-death fights. While some like Shikamaru, Lee, and Kiba get bailed out at the last second, for Choji and Neji, the threat of death feels very real. At the time, it genuinely seemed like they might not make it out. And then there's the final showdown, Naruto versus Sasuke in the Valley of the End. It's one of the most emotionally charged battles in the series.
When Sasuke walks away, leaving Naruto unconscious, it's not just a plot twist, it's a gut punch. Watching it for the first time, especially as a kid, it hits hard. That final image of Sasuke walking off and Naruto falling to bring him back leaves hole in your stomach.
What makes this arc so impactful is that it fundamentally reshapes the entire direction of the series. Shippuden, in large part, exists because of what happens here. The emotional fallout, the sense of failure, the drive to become stronger, it all stems from this moment.
While I understand other arguments in favor of placing other arcs higher, for me, this one's near flawless structure, character development, emotional weight, and lasting narrative consequences makes it one of the best arcs in all of Naruto.
Number 1. The Prophecy and Vengeance arc, at least the way I'm defining it, encompasses everything from Sasuke's confrontation with Orochimaru and Itachi all the way through Pain's devastating assault on Konoha. While the anime separates this into 2 arcs, Prophecy and Vengeance, and then Pain's assault, I see it as one continuous, unified storyline. Not only do the 2 halves flow directly into each other, but thematically and emotionally, they feel like 2 parts of the same climactic build. I don't think I need to work too hard to justify why this arc ranks so highly. The content here speaks for itself. It's not only the strongest arc in Shippuden, but a serious contender for the best arc in the entire Naruto series. Beyond just the fights though, the narrative and character development in this arc is phenomenal. On Sasuke's side, we see him evolve rapidly. He breaks free from Orochimaru's control, finally faces his brother, and learns the devastating truth behind Itachi's actions. That revelation completely reshapes Sasuke's character arc and motivations in a way few story beats in the series managed to do. Meanwhile, Naruto's journey here is just as impactful.
The entire section involving Jiraiya,
Pain, and Naruto is emotionally charged and deeply personal.
Jiraiya's death isn't just sad.
It's meaningful. It pushes Naruto forward, forces him to grow, and acts as a catalyst for one of the most powerful ideological confrontations in the entire series. Pain is not only a visually striking and unique villain, but is also Naruto's most effective philosophical opponent. Everything he says presents a direct, intelligent challenge to Naruto's idealism. Pain's dialogue and his worldview rooted in the concept of pain and the cycle of hatred add layers to the story that hadn't really been explored so explicitly before. His powers, based on the Six Paths and Buddhist mythological references like samsara, are some of the most creative Kishimoto has ever written. And even though literal aliens show up later in the series, Pain still manages to feel like the most otherworldly. Naruto's own arc here, emotionally and morally, is handled with a ton of nuance.
His grief with Jiraiya isn't one note.
He lashes out at Tsunade, struggles to center himself, and wrestles with the choice between vengeance and mercy. His eventual decision to try to understand and forgive Pain isn't easily won, and that tension makes the arc feel so much more honest. All of it leads into what might be the single most iconic moment in Naruto's
god-tier entrance at the lead villains. It's a moment that sends chills even years later, and I haven't even gotten into some of the other major highlights. The mind-blowing twist about Itachi, Hinata's long-awaited confession, and Naruto officially being hailed as the hero of the league. These are some major developments that propel the story to new heights. The emotional and philosophical depth, combined with new power-ups and breathtaking battle sequences filled with high stakes and tension, makes this my favorite arc, and I think this deserves to be best arc in whole of Naruto. What do you guys think? Let me know what you think down in the comments, and like and maybe subscribe if you want to see more. Other than that, I will see you on the next one.